Giovanni.
Nick Priest.
EJ Addison Reed. So let's get going on the agenda. The first item that we have are the minutes for DEIC 13th of July. Carl?
Well, I have neglected my duties this time, and I did not send out a copy. Can we push this until the next meeting, please?
Yes,
Thank you.
thank you. Next item on the agenda is the Select Board and the DEIC Committee. We're looking for a meeting date.
Yes, so I had a chance to speak with Select Board Member Espejo about the initial breakdown of meetings based on some of the unactionable items. We wanted to propose back an alternate meeting structure that also included educational training for the Select Board. If everyone wants, I can review that quickly. And then we can put it on our August 15th agenda for the Select Board to discuss proposed dates and vote on that.
So you want to review again the content of what we're going to talk about at that meeting? Because we had already approved that, but you're saying we have to do it again?
No, so this is the three meetings that were being proposed, correct?
That's correct. And we approved the first meeting, but not the two remaining. And we've been waiting for that first meeting date.
Right. And I try to remind with as much grace and understanding as possible that this committee is still advisory to the Select Board. So even if the committee approves that that's the meeting they'd like to see, the Select Board still gets to have final say as to how things proceed.
So what you're recommending is that we send that document that's already been approved by this committee to the Select Board for them to approve it, and then they'll establish a meeting date. Am I correct?
We can discuss the entirety of the three meeting structure. After talking to Member Espejo, we felt like a large chunk of what wound up being the second meeting could be eliminated due to union contract issues. And we could probably have 1 2-hour meeting encompassing all the things of all three meetings that we're hoping to kind of tackle. Knowing that now, since the drafting and discussion of this, things like the mission statement had been voted on and approved by the Select Board, and we could, revise and make it a more productive, workshop, if you will.
Okay. So it sounds like we have to look at the three meetings again and then come up with another agenda.
Well, if you'd like, we can quickly review the initial agenda that Member Espejo and I put together based off of the three meeting structure that this committee had recommended. And if this body feels like it's an appropriate thing to move forward with, then we can have that put on the 8:15 agenda.
Comments from the committee?
I think it makes sense if you want to go over what you and Mike have in mind, Nick. I'd like to see it.
Yeah, happy to. So essentially, when we were just going through it, and again, I wanted to get another member's take on it before the whole committee, but before it's brought to the whole committee. A large chunk of the second meeting, right? So pay structure, benefits, self-appraisal, and manager assessment, most of which falls under union contract based controls and would require much more in-depth conversation. And right now we're at a point where we're trying to gain alignment across all the different leaders within the community to be more inclusive in language and understanding, be more adaptable at a higher level. So if we table that for the time being and we focus our meeting down into what is essentially, quarter annual report review, philosophy, mission statement work. We can touch on that. I think that, the higher level philosophical, values and the things that we had discussed are still, important and valuable. um, we can review that, and then we would move into a section, which then again, this is all loose, right? Is employment and diversity at work, where we would cover a couple of things pulled out from the second meeting, right? So discussing leadership model meant to engage a welcoming environment for all, discussion of the hiring process that engages all candidates, um, and employee relations, supporting people managers and the role they play in engagement and expectations. At that point, um, we could use the remaining time to move into what is essentially the third meeting. And I couldn't ascertain if there were more. And forgive me, because I went digging and I was having a hard time. Um, we would have a more robust working session on the DEI scorecard, and any other assets we feel we want immediate and direct input from the select board on. Um, in that time. If we feel that needs to be a 2-hour session, we can do that. If we feel like it needs to be broken up into two meetings, we can have that conversation. I feel like um, this could be accomplished in a singular meeting. Um, but that was what select board member Espejo and I had discussed. Oh, and I should also apologies. Whether it happens before or after this meeting, I have been given a couple different names of folks who provide training and seminars for leaders, and the recommendation would be that I mean, really, as it's been for a while now, be that the select board partake in a training seminar um, of some kind. So two separate things, one of which is a more workshop session collaborative thing between this committee and the select board, and the other is a seminar for the select board.
It would be helpful if you would send us an email with the two programs that you're talking about so that we have it, rather than saying we could do it all in 2 hours, or maybe not.
Yeah, I can definitely send this over an email to everybody.
Okay. Any other comments?
Nick, just a question. Do you think the entirety of the select board will be more amenable to one meeting rather than a series of three? Do you see that as an advantage also, or would they, is this, I guess I'm trying to understand where you and Mike were. Is this to make it more palatable for the entire board, or just curious?
In a certain way, yeah. I think that one shouldn't take difficult topics and try to make them as always as palatable as possible. But where possible, I think that we can enter the conversation. Um, you know, would be beneficial. I also think that, like, if this committee comes prepared with suggestions for the workshop, you'll get a we will get um, a lot more productive feedback um, from the select board, right? Because they'll have something to react to. Again, because this committee is advisory, the select board is looking for this committee to make recommendations, right? So, um, you know, as a board, we don't know best, and we're looking for, like, let's take the diversity scorecard, for example, right? We had talked a few months ago about crafting 2 or 3 options, that we could put in front of the select board during the workshop, and walk through them and get their thoughts and feedback on each of them, pros, cons, benefits, drawbacks, whatever, as they might exist logistically in a real practical system. And I think that would be a more productive time frame than kind of open workshopping, right? Something we do a lot in marketing is we set almost extreme time limits to workshops, right? We force people to kind of collaborate within a certain box, because if we drag our feet, then people feel as though they can just kind of kick the ball until someone else kind of pulls the trigger on something. And I feel like if we, and I say but this is a conversation that Mike and I had. If we make it more condensed and robust, I think that we can get a higher level of engagement out of the rest of the board. Plus, I mean, like if you look at a 90-minute or 120-minute breakdown, re-reviewing the first quarterly report, or going over the philosophy mission statement, I mean, you know, we're talking 30 minutes of 120 minutes, right? I mean, if we're blocking 45 minutes for the scorecard and 45 minutes for the diversity discussion around employment, right? There's your breakdown, 30, 45, 45 for a 2-hour chunk. If this committee feels that that's too much for a 2-hour window, then maybe we leave something off the table for now and focus where we want to, right? Because it's almost August and our time is up in November. So to kind of get some action in the last leg of this race, just trying to create something that the select board can react to, and we can then deliver something back that they've already kind of seen and agreed to.
That makes a lot of sense. Thank you.
Well, I think it's
DJ, question, if I could interrupt for a second, say it there. So, Nick, you just said that our tenure for this committee is
have to
over in
I can't
October,
hear you.
November. Can you hear me now?
Yes, thank
Okay.
you.
So, Nick, I had a question for you. You just said that the tenure of this committee is going to be over in November, but then why did we all receive this letter stating that the committee had been extended to June 2023?
It's a great question, because I haven't gotten one of those letters. I know that we did reappointments, because reappointments come in June, and so all committees get reappointed at that point in time. But this ad hoc committee has a specific timetable of a year.
Oh yeah, I actually received two letters. One stating that the appointment had been extended to June 2023, and then another stating that I should show up to be re-sworn in.
We all received the same 2 letters, and I went by the office and got sworn in on Monday.
Okay. That is, for ad hoc committees, that is strange. I'll have to double check with the office as to why. Because even if there was going to be an extension, well, I'll have to look into it. I'm not sure, Saeed.
Okay, no worries.
The 2 thoughts that you shared about having you and Michael decide what should be in the program for 90 minutes is somewhat different than what was submitted that this committee approved. And yes, back in the fall, we did talk about the diversity scorecard. The functions that you mentioned come under human resources, and that's why when I put in the evaluation going forward, is that we need to look at human resources policy, procedure, and practice, and those that guide people who are employed and not a member of a union. That's what needs to be addressed, and the data is gathered by human resources. So I don't know if you want to take that approach or whether you would rather not take that approach. You mentioned about having someone come in and lead the discussion. So I'm just following along with what you already contributed in your conversation.
So BJ, maybe you could help clarify a little bit, in terms of the HR related structure points. Gathering data and developing policy isn't something that would just happen in a single meeting. Um, you know,
That's correct.
so I guess just to kind of help clarify, which of the items from the second meeting align to those that require data? And I'm asking the question in a semi stupid way, because obviously I see things like pay structure and benefits, which would require data to be looked at. But those are actions that we can ask human resources to conduct, that I don't know, like that would be a recommendation that this committee supplies to the select board, either in a quarterly report or the final year-end report, and not something that would be conducted during one of the leadership program meetings, which is why it was.
Here is that we have looked at the data that Joanne has provided for us. It is not appropriate, but it's the only data that's gathered today. So that gathering of data needs to be directed to increase, so we're looking at the right data on an annual basis. And that's why it belongs in human resources, and I'm willing to work with her. However, you and I had a conversation about some of the language that's in the rules and regulations and what's in the union contract, but we haven't gotten any further of that. I submitted it to Paul. We don't know whether it's been carried out. So we need to look at that, but we also need to look at how they're gathering data in human resources, because it's not being accomplished now. And that's what we measured back in the fall when we looked at where are we today. And so there needs to be some direction. Policies and procedures don't exist. There's no reason to follow through. Joanne may not have the staff to be able to pull that data together, but I can certainly suggest what's the organization to look at, how do you gather the data, when do you submit it, what's it going to cost. That needs to be examined. And it's for the school department and for the town. So it's not something that you can do just a conversation with the select board and say, this is where we are. We did that in the 14-page report because we're nowhere because that data is not being gathered correctly.
Right. And so it sounds like we're in agreement on that front, which is why I removed it from the second meeting discussion point, because the recommendation would live either in the quarterly report or the year-end report, right? And that would, what you just said would be the recommendation, right? How we could proceed. The select board would then take that under advisement and vote, whether or not they'd want to do that. And then, but to have it as a part of or to have it really comprise the entirety of the meeting, I guess, like in the discussion with Mike, it was, you know, because of how complex of a conversation this is, it's not going to obviously happen in 90 minutes. So, it's probably best to table this conversation for another, path. And then in terms of what we're defining as a leadership program, focus on the things that we can accomplish within the meeting, right? And things that we can do that the select board can help further the committee's, ends, with the remaining time that we have.
Well, it's all in what you want to accomplish. When I look at the mission statement, yes, that needs to be done, but we have yet to define what's the philosophy and where do we include race when we look at who we're hiring. Why do we look only internally at people who are already there to promote and never look at the outside unless nobody else applies? It's everything that you touch must be examined. And when I talk to the select board about what are your values, which control your behavior, and that's how you interact with every person that you meet, until we decide what the individual has and what the select board has as a group, and anybody that's interacting with the select board should know what those values are so that we can interact with each other. If it hasn't been said, it isn't happening.
I agree.
That's why we want to spend time.
Yep.
Just talking about the values and behavior and then what is necessary for the select board, that can take 90 minutes by itself, because you want to engage in conversation. You just don't want to deliver a message and push it off on everybody. You need to be able to react and talk about it and then understand what it means to you and what it means to the governing body.
Okay. I'm not disagreeing. I kept those things like that in there. And you'll see that when I send over the suggested format that Mike and I put together.
Okay. Any other thoughts?
So just a hypothetical, say, because I'm seeing both sides here. Nick, would you predict, and this is a risky business, I know, like say we have a 2-hour session or even a 90-minute session, and ideally everything on the agenda gets through it. We get through everything on the agenda. Would the select board be amenable to, say we get through 90 minutes and we're only halfway through, we realize, oh, we need another session. Do you think that they would be amenable to scheduling a second one if needed?
I mean, I don't see why not.
Yeah, okay.
Okay.
Again, I mean, I would hope that by now you guys would know this about me, but I try to talk in so much permanence when it comes to the fluidity of things, right? Like the document that we wrote, because it's a recommendation, isn't written in stone. The recommendation that Mike and I talked about isn't written in stone. Things are malleable and have to evolve over time. So I mean, unless it's law, unless it's actual law, um, I'm more than happy to advocate for a change in things. But if this initial meeting gets us in the door and having a live conversation with the select board versus just BJ, to your point, talking at them, um, then I think that it would be more productive in that fashion.
So why don't we put on the agenda for our next meeting, which is August 10th, that we will discuss what Nick is presenting to us that we should consider for the content. Make sense?
Yep.
Thumbs up?
2 thumbs up.
Thank you, thank you.
And just to clarify on the 8:15 select board meeting, we want to have the second quarterly report, but you guys will also do, Nick, you said you guys will look at setting a date for this meeting.
Yeah, so we'll do 2 agenda items. One we've already accounted for, which is the second quarterly report, and then we'll add this as a discussion point. Um, and I can walk everyone through it, and we can discuss. And because everyone will be there, we can do that. And then because I learned this too the last time that we did this, we should make sure that we post for the 15th that the DEI committee is having a meeting as well, because technically quorum, like we know there's going to be a quorum and we're going to be in a meeting. That was Amy's request last time, that we post that there's going to technically be a DEI meeting. I don't know if everybody remembers that. An annoying logistical thing, but
So what you just said is that when we do the second quarterly report, which is August 15th, we're adding additional topic, and that's number 2, which is the program, because we will have talked about that on the 10th.
yes, yeah,
DEIC is meeting on the 10th. We talk, and then we add it to the 15th meeting, both topics.
yes.
I got it.
What was the other part you were saying we needed to post for the 15th too?
It's already posted.
So Amy had said that and maybe I'm just going absolutely bonkers at this point, which is entirely possible. I thought Amy had said that if we knew we were going to be present in a quorum in another meeting, that even if no votes were being taken, we still needed to post it because it was a public quorum of this committee. Even though it's going to be at another committee's meeting. So maybe I can reach
essentially,
out.
because we'll all be in that select board meeting, then technically the DEI is also meeting.
Yeah, I think
Yeah, technically because we're in quorum, which like I don't fully understand how this is like one of the areas that's still a little gray to me, right? Because like if we all wind up in a public place together, right, then that's
I was
quorum.
just gonna say, what if we all met at Yard House? Then we
Right. Yeah, it's like we're not posting that we're going to be at Yard House, at 8 p.m. for drinks or whatever. So it's like where's that line? And
Right.
that's where Amy can school me on proper open meeting law.
Okay, so here's what happened. Last time we met, my computer went out. That's why I was there to you on the phone. It's been corrected. I already sent Lynn the agenda for the second quarterly report. She didn't receive it in time, so she rescheduled it. It's already on the agenda for August 15th. She already has that. And so what I can do is send her an email adding, we wanted to add a second topic, which is the content of what the select board DEIC meeting content could be.
Yeah, it should be a new agenda item because we're looking for a discussion and hopefully a vote from the select board on this.
Okay,
Whereas we don't necessarily need a vote from the select board on the quarterly report.
got it.
Additionally, BJ, based on what Nick just said, because we'll have a quorum of the DEI committee within this select board meeting on the 15th, we would need to post that the DEI committee is also meeting on the 15th. So essentially that will be an additional action item.
Got it. Nothing else, right? It's like, oh, what? Okay. Next item on the agenda is looking at where we're working in pairs to talk to the exec meetings over the summer. And the ones that have already met, the assessor meeting met. Recreation already met. School committee already met. Town clerk, Amy was away. She had a loss of family. And when I stopped by Monday, she's on vacation till the 1st of August. So I'll send her a follow-up email the 1st of August. I sent an email out to Brenda Rappaport for planning board. She received that email June 23rd, and I've not heard back from her yet. So I'll send her another one the 1st of August. I sent one to Rob Neufeld, and his was on the 30th of June, and I've not heard back from him. He's been away, and he should be returning on the 1st of August. Yes, Carl?
I got an email back from Rob Neufeld that said that exact same thing. I'll be back until I'll be out of town until the third week in July, and I have a reply to him sitting in my outbox, which I will send directly after this meeting.
Okay.
Try to set something up for this week or next week.
Okay, that'd be great. Anybody else? What about health? Nancy, that's you and Carl.
What we talked about last time was Dr. Weiner was going to talk to his full board and get back to us. I haven't heard from him. Have you, Nancy?
No.
Or from the other person you spoke with?
I see Michael Green is actually on our call, and I think he was the other guy. So
Oh.
I don't know if we should wait till open or if he can jump in right now to say hello.
Cool.
Hello, everybody. Yeah, Mike Green with the Board of Health. Interesting, we're kind of segueing your efforts and our efforts. We actually had started looking at kind of assessing where we were on the DEI scale with our volunteer demographics and everything, and kind of reaching out and fleshing out more DEI focused recruitment and standards for the Board of Health, particularly to our MRC and everything. So just kind of poaching some information, if you will, from this, kind of generating some ideas and trying to, right now we're working on some surveys just to kind of see where we are at with our volunteer force right now and implement some changes and then go back and reassess and see, you know, kind of what the feeling is towards DEI and our volunteers. So anything that you can filter through Dr. Weiner would be great too.
Thank you. We appreciate your feedback. Should also know that if you want to do a guided discussion, do it Zoom or face to face if you want to meet once he's back. Either of those can happen. And if it's a Zoom meeting, I can set it up for you.
All right, sounds good, Doctor.
Okay. Any other thoughts? Great hearing from you, Michael.
Yeah, thank you, Michael.
Thank you very much.
So we had on the agenda, the next item is the second quarterly report. Nick, you were not present at our last meeting, but this committee made some changes. And that's what's been already submitted to Lynn for the select board to take a look at it.
BJ?
Yes,
The copy you sent for this meeting, I noticed that the April 11th date wasn't corrected.
I sent you the wrong one because I did correct.
Okay, yeah, I just wanted to double check. I figured you would have
Instead
fixed
of the
it.
exclamation point, it was a 1-1.
Okay, yeah. And we had decided to add the vote also.
Yeah. Okay,
Okay.
great.
Great, thanks.
Okay, the next item I have is the performance evaluation. I sent you a document on that. And it's dated July 12th. And because of the consulting work that I've done, when you look at the philosophy that's stated at the top, I now have philosophy and core values as one category: mission, goals, decision, actions, results, and self-appraisal. So what I did in putting this document together was to first talk about how you explore people think, and I referenced that. And then as I went through each of those categories, I talked about my own philosophy and then what the committee presented to the select board. And it hasn't been adopted by the select board. So that's at the bottom of page 1. Instead of saying it's the Diversity, Equity, Inclusion Committee believes, it's the select board and the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee believe. So it's the two categories together, and then the statement remains the same. And that's a suggestion for them to consider. Going on to page 2, talk about the board's core values. The definition is provided from the Lakota Way. The definition is from Webster's Dictionary. And the two exercises are first for each person to look at their core values and what motivates them. And then second, collectively for the select board to look at what motivates people to work with us as an organization. Very different from how I feel and how all of us feel. So that's what we want to explore. And that's part of the content of the meeting you were talking about, Nick. Page 3 looks
If I may, I'm sorry to interrupt you. As part of this exercise, is for the individual, you rank all 12 based on your personal beliefs. Is that correct?
Yes.
And then when it comes to the second part for the select board, I only see 5 spaces, and I'm not sure if that was a formatting issue or if that's intentional to try to choose the top 5?
I listed 5 spaces because when you're looking at yourself, as you mature, as you think, of the 12, what's number 1 today might have been number 8 5 years ago. So you change collectively. When you look at the whole organization, it's what prevails everybody who's working with the select board. And instead of trying to itemize all 12, you look at what is the real driver that we're aiming for with this organization. And it could be 5, it could be 6, it could be more than that or less than that. But it's to frame it and say that if you don't do all 12, it's okay. It's what we think is critical for the organization to be successful. And once you adopt that, then it should be reflected in how, because your values control your behavior, what you believe in is how you act toward others. That's why you want people to reflect on the important behaviors for this organization to be successful here. And that's how we treat one another. So that's why we call them core values, because it has the deepest motivation for us and for us to function collectively.
Thank you.
And so that's why we had page 3, and it's to go through the exercise and talk about it and why you were driven a certain way. Page 4 has the mission statement, just to observe what has already been voted and has happened. Number 1 was number 5, and we moved it to number 1 because it's how we treat one another, which is primary to all of us. It's not last on the list or somewhere below what you're aiming for. It's how we care for one another. And that's why we have the statement that's been approved. The select board has not looked at the definition of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I've added it because it's governed by federal and state law. So that's what I've listed there, but we at least have to talk about it so we recognize it. If you don't recognize this, then you're not engaged in what we need you to do. So that's why we want to know, what does diversity mean? And it's by all races. What does equity mean? And what does inclusion mean? So there needs to be some discussion there as well. On page 6, it's the 3-theory strategy with why, how, and where. And remember, why, how, and where came from the book Start with Why, because it looks at how people think. And what I've done with this exercise is to look at Maslow's hierarchy. And this was published in 1943. If you look at the bottom of the page, it's number 1 with physiology: air, food, drink, sleep, shelter, and sex. Maslow said you need to accomplish those tasks first in your life. Second is safety, with security, protection, and stability. Third is belonging, to give and receive love, affection, and trust. Esteem. However, if something happens and you don't stay with the person that you have a bond with, and so you no longer belong, Maslow says that you can't take care of esteem before you satisfy what needs to be done to belonging. So that's what people try and walk away from, what he proposed. And of course, Maslow says that the last is self-actualization, realize one's full potential to be everything one is capable of becoming. That's for the individual, what you're able to do. The second column is you, and those are my values. And I start at the bottom too, because I look at how human beings develop. When you're born, you have a brain. You look at your mom, it's the first face you see. You're happy. You try and open those eyes and see who you belong to. It travels the same way because you're able to use your brain before you use your limbs to be able to crawl, to stand, to walk. So brain is first, body is second. Values are learned from your parents, from your family, from your friends. It's your purpose, your cause, and your beliefs, what you're engaged in as a human being. Why do you do the things that need to be done? The soul is what happens to you with your health and what happens when you lose a loved one. Those are challenges that we all meet, we engage, we have to when it's forced upon us, we don't know where to go and don't know what to do, whether it's us or loss of a relative, of a son. But somehow you manage to conquer what needs to be done. And then the last one at the top is resilience. When you're engaged in something that can pull you apart, like the loss of your brain or your body because you're not taking care of your body to be strong and energized and live a long lasting life, or your values are out of step, or you know your own values, but you go to work in an organization that doesn't share the same values, what do you do about it? That's what we need to focus on to develop ourselves. The last column is the organization, and again, it starts at the very bottom. Most organizations have a pyramid, and you'll see that the CEO or the president is at the top of the pyramid. I'm saying to you that that's incorrect. That the person who leads, who has the why, who reflects, who makes the the intellectual decisions, is the person who guides the organization, and we stand on his or her shoulders. It's not them breathing down on us, they're guiding us so that we stand and we know why we're engaged in doing the goals that we want to accomplish. It isn't just to bring in the money. That is less than what we're trying to achieve. It's whatever we believe that's true and of value to us. And so when you look at the how, those are the values, behaviors, and strategy. Those are the executives, according to the system that we're using here in Burlington. At the bottom is the select board. They govern us. The executives who guide the organizations are second, and they look at values, our behavior, and the strategy that we're going to apply. The third are managers and supervisors. That is the application, what we're going to do and how we're going to do it. The fourth are union representatives that will help us look at goals, action steps, results, self-appraisal. It's all there. It's either the rules, regulations, which are personnel policy, procedure, and practice, or it's the union contract. And it's the relationship that the union representatives have, or the managers and supervisors have with the employees that they govern every day. And then last are the employees. So I've listed this as the category, and it doesn't matter whether it's an employee or a student, they are there and can look to us for guidance and support and direction that each should take to be successful in our organization. So that's what I would present to the select board, and let's have a conversation around this because it's probably never been done before. But let's have the conversation and figure out, what's the select board like? What are the ideas that we have and how we're going to achieve this? What's the relationship they have with the leadership that's working for them in the key executive positions? We're trying to sell to those executives what their mission statement is. So it is now part of the annual Burlington report that we do on an annual basis. We're trying to exemplify that we care about diversity, equity, inclusion for everybody that lives in this town and everybody that's being educated here. But we have to get the leadership to take the lead to make this happen in their reality. Once that gets in place, then we can begin to look at what is personnel policy procedures. What are we doing for union contracts? What should we have our evaluation be based on the diversity scorecard, so that we're measuring all of this on an annual basis. So that's page 6. Going on to page 7, we look at our goals for this year. And we talked with what's listed here to implement an educational series for us. We're still in the process of doing that. We did the mission statement, that's been accomplished. We want to look at rules and regulations and union contracts. And we want to meet with the key executives to say what are they going to put into their annual report. And then we want to meet continually with the select board to talk about where are we and where do we need to go. Page 8 looks at the select board, and those are the 2 things that we have listed here. Here is on the second item to discuss with the committee that Paul will work with Joanne and on the diversity scorecard, and he can also give us permission or participate with us in talking to union contract, the labor lawyer. We said that we wanted this to happen, but we haven't recognized it, and so I want to open the door to continue to have that conversation. Page 9, we're still looking at the formula where you start out with philosophy, core values, mission, goal, decision. On page 9, you're looking at a decision, and here is just an exercise for how people look at how they make a decision. Most people do it instantly. They say, oh, this is a positive, I got to go do it. And you jump in and you go. I'm suggesting that we pull back and we say, what are the advantages and disadvantages? And if disadvantage comes up, how will we handle it? You do that before you make the decision to move forward. So that's what this exercise helps us to focus on. I call it advantages and disadvantages, pros and cons, where you're successful, where you're unsuccessful, where it can get in your way. There are different ways of phrasing this. What are challenges? But you need to have that conversation before you decide to move forward. Once you move forward, then you're anticipating what could or may not happen, but at least you've talked about it. Once you make the decision, then you outline what are the action steps. And here you do it with a calendar. If you're new to an organization, this is just my take on it. The first 3 months you're in a new job, that's getting to know the people you're working with, meet them, understand them. Why are you there? Why are they there? And figure out how you can work together. The second 3 months, you want to look at what has been accomplished up to this point. And if there's a need to change the organization, it might be discussed at that point. If you do need to make changes, then the next 3 months, that's the third 3 months, implement the changes. And in the fourth 3 months, you're looking at what's been accomplished and what strategies do you need to put forward to continue to move in the right direction. So that's just trying to articulate when you have an action step and putting a calendar to support it. It could be less time or more time what you're looking to achieve. On page 11, you're looking at the results. When you identify a goal, what's the outcome look like? You need to be able to articulate that and then see if what you've accomplished matches that. And so, again, this is looking at a process. It's just a review, but a way of discussing it and trying to look at what was expected, whether it happened or not, and if it didn't happen, why not? And then the last one is self-appraisal, and that's language that I've used before. It's there to suggest, and some people have said, why do you want to engage in self-appraisal? My story is this: when I gathered data for my dissertation topic. The company that I went to was IBM, which is an international organization. And of course, they do a lot of education of their managers because they have a school system inside IBM that helps managers to become effective. What I discovered that they did through the learning process is that every employee in IBM does a self appraisal first. It's a written document that is given to their upline manager, who then composes their own appraisal of the employee. Both of those written documents are then kept and both are put in the employee file so that you have a reflection from both people on how the employee did and how they were successful. If there's an opportunity to open the door for additional training or to pursue a new kind of goal that could stimulate their ability to think and interact, that could be documented what you have to set for the next goals in the following year. But having those two documents is absolutely critical. Well, that's a strategy that I implemented since 1992. And every place I've ever worked, I've always done my self appraisal. And fortunately, I always reported to the president, and I used to get the feedback. BJ, all I have to do is choose the words that can reflect what you've already reported. That's much better than them trying to dig and say, well, you didn't do this right, or you didn't do that. No, I am tougher on myself than they would ever be. And so I'm saying that for every employee, if this organization decides that you want to value the employee and their contribution to the organization, have them participate in documenting their own performance. It's a wise decision to make for be that receptive with the employee. So anyway, that was the document that I prepared to look at my own appraisal and to look at what this committee already accomplished. Your thoughts?
It's very thorough, BJ. Thank you for going through it all. I don't think it's very powerful. I'm just wondering, and maybe Nick can clarify how this, because this, correct me if I'm wrong, but this type of exercise is not something that is traditionally done by the select board. Is that right?
In the context of year-end reports for committees.
Well, I mean, in any kind of context, not that I have seen that many meetings, but I just, and again, I think it's going to be very valuable, but I haven't seen the select board do like some of the values exercises. Again, I think it would be extremely worthwhile to set those ideas up in order to make some of the changes that we want to recommend, or make some of the recommendations that we want to make, to have that kind of mindset set up ahead of time will be valuable. But like they're I guess I'm having trouble imagining them doing it. How do you think the rest of the board will react to this type of suggestion?
So, on the topic of performance evaluations, we do conduct performance evaluations. Um, you know, Paul obviously,
Sure.
is the top one. All personnel things are kept fairly confidential. Um, and you'll even see when we talk about citizens' time, right? Like if someone's bringing up a personnel issue, it should be addressed in office first before we, bring it into public. Um, so they're familiar with Paul, conducts a self evaluation, and then we conduct individual evaluations that are then compiled, for a final, full assessment. Um, in terms of a committee reviewing itself, that's certainly a first. Um, by which to me, I say the content, the not the context, the framework is typically set up as a final report, right? So when town meeting had their ad hoc transportation committee, they produced a final report, right? Um, when this new transportation committee wraps up, they will also produce a final report. So as opposed to framing it as an evaluation, of how they did, they're presenting back, the information and the data they've gathered with proposed recommendations to move forward. Um, I think this does that, and then goes that next level of kind of capturing what did and didn't work well. Um, my biggest question, BJ, is if the if the hope is to conduct a lot of this philosophy, core values work in our leadership session. Um, is there is the intent behind having in this document just to have it for like clarification and record for callback, or are we saying at the end of the you know um, end of the ad hoc time frame we're gonna also redo our values, even though say we do them in August or September or whatever.
What this document represents is November 1, 2021 through June 30th, 2022. So I'm looking at what this committee did for those 6-7 months. And yes, I evaluated myself, but also I put down what we succeeded and the direction we needed to go. That's what that process looks like. And hopefully, first of all, I think we should use this when we convene a meeting with the select board to say, this is the process. Here's where we are. This is the direction we need to go. And here's the strategy, which are the process at the top of the page. It provides a direction. If the select board wants to take this challenge to do something very different, that then can become the example for the key executives. All we're asking them to do is what the select board has already done, which is the mission statement. That's why we're opening the door right now to get them to consider that. The select board makes a definition of what is diversity all about, what is equity, what is inclusion. If we need to further define it, the select board can do that. Once we define it, then it could go to other parts of the organization. In other words, the select board is in the leadership to guide this organization on what to do. That's why I laid it out the way I did.
Okay, so your vision then is to utilize this as a launching off point for some of the initial leadership conversations around values and mission,
Yes,
etc. Okay.
absolutely.
Okay. Um, okay.
And I know you and Michael have talked about it, but I've done diversity work for 45 years. And I always want this process to, first of all, understand the meaning of what we're doing, understand the engagement, and to be a leader, to demonstrate if we can do it, everybody can do it. It isn't just one little tiny piece that can manage this. And so we have these conversations, we have them over time. I'm willing to do the quarterly report and say, this is what we've done by date and by time, always reflecting on what we've accomplished. But then I want to open the door to say, this is where we have to go. And I can put the dates on this, November 1st or 1st of November 2021, June 30th, 30th of June 2022, because that's what it covers. And yet it points to what we can do next year, what we can do the remaining 6 months, or we can go the 6 months after that. But the select board is the leader. And what they do, everybody else will open up their arms.
So just a follow-up question: do you envision that some form of this document would act as an updated version of this document would act as like a year-end report come the end of our ad hoc time?
Are you suggesting that I do a report in October?
Well, so I'm just trying to play out the
The
next.
one for December or the one for June?
Well, so let's assume that this committee's time is up in November, right? Let's just operate under that assumption for the momentary time being until I can resolve the confusion around that. And it could be my confusion. So this report, this evaluation, this self-evaluation appraisal will function to help initiate the conversation at the leadership meeting, which I think is great. I think that it's a strong foundational document as opposed to even reviewing like prior quarterly reports. Right, it reviews everything to date, and also gives us a launching point for the values and the mission statement. So then we come out of that meeting and drawing all kinds of assumptions. We continue working from that point through to November. Would the goal then to be to update this document as like a final appraisal
Yes,
of the committee's work?
do that. I can do that easily.
Okay.
But this is the strategy for how to move forward, and I'm as open as I possibly can be to provide you with the assessment process and the engagement and the participation. And I know that the select board has to make a decision. Is this the way we want to continue? And hopefully they'll say yes, because I've never worked at a place that got anything done in the first 6 months or the first year or the first 3 years. It just doesn't happen. I mean, if you look at rules and regulations, the last enactment on the affirmative action plan was 1986. It's going to take a little bit of time. And I'm willing to engage as long as every participant on this committee is willing to engage, because we're going to have the conversations. We are the link. We can provide the direction. And we want to engage with the select board. We want to help them appear to be more positive in their thinking. And that's why we're moving with the key executives now to get them to do a mission statement. Let's get it in print. Let's make it part of their annual report. They want to go off and talk about it. Invite us back. If you need help articulating what you've said, we'll help you do that. Right, Nancy?
Yep.
We volunteered to say, have us come August, September, October, anytime. So yes, this is the direction.
Yeah, and this is a ongoing process, so not only does it take time, it can evolve. And I just want to say a couple comments about the report too, or evaluation. Um, yeah, again, thank you. Really appreciate the hard work you put into this, BJ. It's laid out very nicely, and I like the idea of using it as the template and source document for the meeting going forward, and also for a report at the end. My comment was actually about the goal and results. I know we haven't gone to those dates, so I'm assuming this is an example, but I think you mentioned earlier something about the HR data. Do you know if they will have some on July 30th? Because I think that was like the date for the previous um, data sets. But you said something about it not being collected correctly.
No, the last conversation we had was to invite Joanne to come to a meeting to identify the key executives. That was in the April timeframe.
Mhm.
No conversation with her. And in fact, what I put into this report was to work with Paul because I think he's the link that I need to get to Joanne, even though she is responsible for the select board, but she's also responsible for the school department. I still got the same link because that's where the data comes from. And that's where policy, procedure, practice needs to be put into place so that you don't have people who are falling off the ship in disagreement because it's not documented how you handle things. It's nowhere in the document. You disagree with your manager, what happens? You probably get fired. And that's not how you treat people. You need to provide a resource, an opportunity, how to engage and have a conversation and cope with what has evolved. And the only way you can do that is through procedure, policy, and practice. How do you do it? What do you do? Do you follow the procedure? If it doesn't get followed, then they go to EEOC or the MCAD and they file a complaint that becomes public in the newspaper. So you don't want to screw people like that. You got to have it in place where they are, and if it's not complete, make it complete. That's the voice from Human Resources coming to you on that one. I should tell you every time there was a complaint. If it was, this is at a university, between two employees, then the person who gathered the data was the director of human resources. If it was between two students, then it was the dean of students who gathered the data from both the two students. If it was between a faculty member and a student, I'm the one that collected the data. Whenever we did that, those people who gathered the data brought it to me, and then I would examine every policy, procedure, and practice and determine whether the policy had been violated, and if yes, what action should be taken, and then to document it. And yes, it meant that if it was a faculty member and he pursued students, then he got fired. And then, of course, he called his attorney, who called our attorney, but we were prepared for that. You cannot not provide an avenue for which people can proceed to address their concerns. Not in the organization, you get kicked in the ass. So there's a reason behind doing all of this.
Definitely. I'm wondering if she can just send us the data when she gets it. Because I'm curious about those numbers too, because
Oh,
that's
I want us to be, but if she isn't gathering, she doesn't collect it, it isn't monogrammed in the way it should be, nothing is happening. Nothing is happening. And I've done it for years. So I know what's missing.
Okay.
But if the door isn't open, I can't reach out and try to get to her
Yeah.
without permission from the above.
So like the previous sets of datas, are those valid, or do you think those aren't proper either?
No,
Okay.
no.
Because there is a data set in, I'm assuming it's the same, but there's also one in the annual report.
I know.
Yeah. Okay. We don't have to go into details about that, but I'm
We're
curious.
still at the beginning.
Yeah.
We're very much at the beginning of where we need to go.
Okay.
Any other comments? Okay. Next item on the agenda. It's an open meeting. Any other comments?
BJ, with regards to the appraisal, I should have asked this earlier. When are you looking for feedback by?
Feedback by what? The appraisal on me?
No, if I mean, I assume this is a template that we can then utilize.
If you want to make some feedback on this, send it to me.
Okay.
Just in an email, the way Nancy sent me the corrections. Anything that you think or needs to be expressed, or do I need to say this is an example, even though I do in here? But if you think that it's the wrong approach, tell me.
No, I just wanted to make sure that I had a good chance to read it through.
Read it through. Our next meeting is August 10th. I need your feedback within a week
Okay.
on the appraisal part. So a week from today. And the reason that I say that is I have to give this to Lynn if you want to raise it with the select board the following week, which is the 15th.
Well, no, this we'd use at our leadership meeting, right? This wouldn't be used at the select board meeting on the 15th.
Well, that's what I thought you were asking me. If you wanted to put some appraisal into this, you were suggesting the 15th. But if you're not, then we can just wait till our next meeting, which is the 10th.
Okay.
Is that all right with everybody? Any feedback is by the 10th of August. Okay. Nick, you ask for future meeting dates for WebEx.
Yes. So I can not be the block to making sure that we have our meetings on time. If we want to schedule beyond the 10th, a meeting or two out, I can make the WebExes for all of them.
Okay.
And that way, no one's going, Nick, where the heck are you?
I have the following dates: 10th of August, 24th August, 7th December. I'm sorry, September. I'm way ahead. 21st September. So that's 4 meeting dates. That gets us through 2 months. Is that okay?
That's great. Thank you.
Any other comments? Feedback? No? Motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Nick, second.
Second.
Carl. Moved and second. Please vote by name.
Nancy Bonacera, yes.
Parafas, yes.
Sayed Ghani, yes.
Nick Priest, yes.
BJ, yes. Thank you all.
Thanks.
Bye.
Good
Talk
night.
to you. Bye.
Bye-bye.